y'all ready for this?
This is djWHEAT from the Championship Gaming Series Online, here to bring you more recaps, this time from the 2008 World Championship Qualification round. The way that this bracket works in particular is the two losing teams from the North American playoffs, 3D New York and the San Francisco Optics, would face off first. And the winner would go on to fight the London Mint, and the winner of that match would ultimately move on to join the other teams in the wild card spot for the 2008 CGS World Championships. Our first matchup will be 3D New York versus the San Francisco Optics. Our first matchup was Dead or Alive Male, where Chappelle from 3D took on Ninja CW from the Optics. Chappelle, well, unfortunately he was only able to get one round as Ninja CW looked far too dominant for this New York player. Several counters, good throws, and a great strategy going into this matchup won it for Ninja CW 5-1, giving an early lead to the San Francisco Optics 1-5. That led us into Dead or Alive Female, where Cools Villa went to take on Vanessa. And many expected Cools Villa to do much better than she did in this matchup, but Vanessa, having switched characters back to Hitomi, really came out of the gate fighting and shut down Cools Villa. The overall score 5-2. Cools Villa was able to get 2 additional rounds for the 3D team, but ultimately that gave a big lead to the San Francisco Optics with an overall score 3-10. Our next game was Counter-Strike Source. The map was DE Nuke, and we saw very interesting results from both sides. 3D in the first half managed to take down 6 rounds to the Optics 3, but in the second half we saw 3D pick up the 4 rounds they needed to earn themselves a victory, while Optics picked up the remaining 5 rounds, making the overall score 8-10. There is some solid action in this Counter-Strike Source matchup, including a beautiful mid-air deagle headshot by Nick Noit from Team 3. Ultimately, Team 3D pulled out the victory 10-8, and that made the overall score 13-18, a 5-point lead for San Francisco. Going into our next game, that was FIFA 08, where we saw Wizakor from 3D take on Sturmy from the Optics. Now, both these players have performed very, very well all season, but they had to put their records behind them because ultimately this matchup would determine who would advance to the next qualification round and who would go home. Well, Wizakor, the top FIFA player from 2007 in the CGS, came out fighting, and although we had a 0-0 regulation score going into the second half, Wizakor fired not 1 but 2 solid goals into the net of Sturmy to take the lead 2-0, and that brought back a little bit of the deficit that New York was facing, making the overall score 15-18 after Wizakor put 2 goals into the net of Optics Sturmy, and that would make Forza the final game that would decide who would move on and who would go home. Because 3D was down 15-18, there was actually only 2 scenarios that would let them win and advance. Scenario number 1 was 3D took first and second place. Scenario number 2 was a first and third place from 3D. They were going up against the San Francisco Optics, and many may know that that is 3D's practice partners, so they had a very tough race ahead of them. But overall, the Optics took first and third, exactly what 3D needed. That made the overall score 5-2 in that Forza matchup. Although they did score second place, it was not enough to win the franchise match. That made the overall score 17-23 in favor of the San Francisco Optics, and that meant that New York was going home and San Francisco would move on, but now they would be forced to play back-to-back versus one of UK's finest teams, the London Mint. And our first game would be Dead or Alive Female, where the ever so popular and almost indestructible Vanessa would go up against the London Mint Strobe. And it was a good matchup. I'd have to say that Strobe actually fought very, very well, some very close rounds. However, we saw the fire from deep within Vanessa as she brought home the victory 5-2, a solid start for the San Francisco Optics and a 3-point lead going into our second game. That was Forza Motorsport 2. The map for this particular Forza matchup was Inland Taipan, and as we all know, the corkscrews would definitely come into play here in this race. We saw the Optics come out with an early lead, but there was a battle throughout the entire race as the London Mint did everything they can to constantly barrel into the lead racers of the San Francisco Optics. Ultimately, though, Mix 'em Up and Sakamanjaro brought it home for their team. They were able to score first and third place, giving them a 5-2 win in this particular game, and making the overall score 10-4, still in favor of the San Francisco Optics. And that would make our next matchup, FIFA, probably one of the most anticipated matchups between these two teams, as we saw two Europeans, Sturmy from the San Francisco Optics, take on a guy that some people say is legendary in the FIFA arena, Chrissy B. It was a very interesting matchup. In regulation, we saw no goals in the first half. We saw no goals in the second half, and that meant it came down to the penalty kicks. After a grueling war during the penalty kicks, it was Chrissy B who was able to get the first ball blocked and ultimately awarding him the game 3-2 over Optic Sturmy, and the first game that was won by the London Mint. That made the overall score 12-7 as we moved into our fourth game, Counter-Strike Source. And this match was played on DE Dust 2, a map that we're all very familiar with if you come from the Counter-Strike community. And we expected this one to be a good one, and it was. The London Mint did come out on top 10-8, but the second half proved to be very interesting. At one point, the London Mint was actually up 10-5, but they weren't able to squeeze out those additional rounds, and Optics was able to rally on a comeback. That did come into play later on, but first, that made the overall score 20-17 in favor of the San Francisco Optics, giving them a 3-point lead going into our final game, Dead or Alive Male. And you could just go back and erase everything that happened because it would all be determined by this matchup here. London Mint's Padaman needed to make sure that Ninja CW did not score more than 2 rounds. 2 rounds would guarantee them, of course, a tie. 3 rounds would automatically mean that San Francisco moves on to that wild card spot in the World Championships. And Ninja CW pulled it out big. Newcomer, new draft for the San Francisco Optics, and new talent here in the 2008 CGS season. Ninja CW not only got the 2 rounds he needed, but he was able to win the matchup 5-4 over a very tough London Mint competitor, Padaman, and that made the overall score 25-21. San Francisco will move on and will be in the wild card position for the 2008 CGS World Finals. This is djWHEAT from the Championship Gaming Series. Congratulations to all the teams, and congratulations to the San Francisco Optics for moving on. Check back for more coverage and more recaps on thecgs.com.